What is up, all you freaks out there? This is Ryan.
And this is Rhonda.
Happy first day of fall.
It is the first day of fall. Can you believe it?
Equinox. For some reason, I thought that the first day of fall always falls on a Tuesday. I always felt like it happened on a Tuesday for some reason.
Where did you get that from?
Tuesday. But apparently, I was wrong, and it happened any day of the week. So, happy first
always
day of fall.
Always the 22nd of September is the first day of fall.
Well, now I know. I'll put it on my calendar. It is the fall equinox. I'm so excited. It's my favorite time of year. I would have been out celebrating, in the woods, enjoying the beautiful fall weather, but was feeling kind of crappy this weekend. Yeah, you got the bug hit me. Everyone is sick in this house.
Well, because school just started.
Yeah, that's true.
Back about a month, and so that's when it all starts up again.
We have Lois Clark. Hey, Lois and Lost Souls. PI, what is up? How are you? Welcome to the show. It is the first day of fall, which is good. Okay, I love fall, but then we have the evil holiday. Good and evil. It is National White Chocolate Day, which in my eyes is an evil holiday because white chocolate is disgusting.
I'm not a big white chocolate fan either.
See?
I am not. No.
And I'm glad. It is not my favorite type of chocolate.
Me neither.
I don't even if it's real. Is it even really chocolate?
I don't know.
Doesn't
taste like
posing as chocolate. And of course, it is. I don't have to tell you. Obviously, it is Chain Mail Day, which I mean, not like chain mail, like email chain. I'm talking actual chain mail you put on yourself when you're about to fight a battle.
That was called chain mail too?
Chain mail. Yes.
Educated me.
Yes. Well, that's what we do here on the Freaking Awesome Paranormal Show. We educate people. And I kind of feel bad that I scheduled this interview on Chain Mail Day, which I realize is such a big holiday for people that they
I have to save my chain mail suit till tomorrow.
Oh my gosh, man. Can you imagine just walking out, walking out the store, like walking out, just wearing chainmail? I'm celebrating. Getting into the holiday spirit. So again, I see Dan and CJ in the queue. I just want to thank them very much for joining us on chain. I should have for a less important holiday like Christmas or something. I mean, it's chainmail day.
And I hope we're not keeping them from their.
I know. Hopefully they got their chain mailing done earlier today, and they can focus on the show.
That's right.
Yes. I bet Dan has chain mail on underneath his shirt right now.
I bet he does.
I'm thinking he does. I do. Really heavy stuff. Not really comfortable, but I'm just getting into the holiday spirit. So what is going on with you?
I got nothing much going on. We just done a show with Howie with Hill City Paranormal. That was a lot of fun. Lot of fun. So
yeah, if you guys don't know, if you don't know, you should. Every Sunday night at 7:00 p.m., the Iran Effect is in full effect.
Yep.
On the Rift Radio Network.
Yep.
It is a Sunday show, so the cards are not going to speak until Tuesday, right?
The cards are sleeping tonight.
They're
celebrating to give us our message on Tuesday night.
And of course they had a big time celebrating card chainmail day.
They did.
They too. They did. So, but we do have a new word today. We have a new word. This is the time for us to educate you guys. More education. We're just really handing out, throwing out the education, throwing out the lessons tonight. Yes, we are just giving tonight, giving you the wealth of knowledge we bring you on the Freaking Awesome Paranormal Show. The word of the day is lubberwort.
Lubberwort.
I'm running out of words here too. I got to start looking back, see if I have any repeats.
Lubberwort. I have no idea what that would mean. We have a good guess on that one.
It sounds like something you would find growing on your feet.
Yeah.
Like a lubberwort. You want one of those. Those are terrible. A lubberwort is I can't read my handwriting. A word to describe someone who is lazy or mentally slow, which is basically what I was for the past 3 days. Definitely mentally slow. And pretty much lazy. I was a total lubberwort this weekend, to put that into a sentence. What is up, Josh? Hope you're enjoying all the knowledge we're giving you tonight. A lubberwort.
Lubberwort. I mean, I have my moments depending on the week.
Yeah, I've been known to lubberwort myself. I've been lubberworting.
That's kind of what I did today, I think. I mean, I made a grocery store pickup, but other than that, in the podcast earlier, I've just been kind of laying low today. Watching some TV.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with just recharging.
Like a real Sunday, like a lazy Sunday.
Sunday is one of those days that you're supposed to take off and just relax.
Yeah.
And, on this particular day, lounge around in your chainmail.
And eat your white chocolate.
Yes. They'll promptly take your white chocolate and throw it in the trash can. That's what you need to do.
I agree.
I'm trying to think of what is worse, white chocolate or candy corn.
Candy corn.
I don't know, man. Because candy corn has got that like nostalgic fall feeling to it. I can be like, okay, I'm excited because I see candy corn.
But white chocolate, they do have those cookies and cream Hershey bars that are white chocolate. They're not horrible. They're not great, but they're not horrible. They're better than candy corn.
White chocolate, hot chocolate's not that bad either. Not that bad, but I'm not going to say it's not evil. It's less evil now, but still, it's still the work of the devil. Yes, Michael Brooks, you do.
They
yes,
both suck. I agree. I'm not.
Yes.
Neither.
We'll do a Would You Rather with our guests. First, we'll bring on Dan Friedman and CJ. Welcome to the show. We've got a hard-hitting question for you guys. Would you rather eat white chocolate or candy corn?
White chocolate for sure.
See, I like seeing candy corn, but I don't like eating it.
I agree with you, Ryan. I can look at candy corn, but I will not eat it unless it's made by the what is it, Jelly Bean Factory, the Jelly Bellies.
Yeah,
they do have candy corn that's actually okay.
I need to try that out. And again, thank you, CJ and Dan, for joining us on National Chainmail Day.
And yesterday was National Golf Day.
It was. Oh my gosh.
Listen, I would have worn my suit of armor if I would have known it was Chainmail Day.
Might have saved the ladies back then from getting killed off by Jack, huh, Dan?
It would have.
That would have come in handy for all the people who were killed by Jack the Ripper. If they had chainmail, maybe they would have survived it.
Their actor would have improved.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, how did you get into the whole Jack the Ripper thing? What brought you to this world?
Would that be to me?
Yes.
Oh, so I wasn't really into Jack the Ripper when I first got into Jack the Ripper. It was really following Arthur Conan Doyle, who is the creator of Sherlock Holmes.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was researching this for the first time, it was only because I was actually tracing the growth and development of Arthur Conan Doyle from the time he was born to the time he was 30. I came across a couple of articles in Science Magazine and JAMA, which are medical journals. And once I found on him with his thesis on syphilis and his article on repealing the Contagious Diseases Act, which was about putting women that were deemed to be possess syphilis into lock hospitals, I kind of was like, what's on this man's mind? So I did my research on him, and through that research, I learned all about Jack the Ripper.
So what got you started on, like, what got you so fascinated about Arthur Conan Doyle?
Oh, I mean, first of all, he was, the first thing I ever read was this 25-year-old medical student writing a 100 and something page, what we would consider a PhD thesis in 1 month about a topic that I could not picture how he knew anything about at that age. And going, wait a minute, I'm 25 years old and I'm in medical school. And if someone asked me to write this myself, there would be no way on this earth I could do such a thing, let alone in 1 month. Because he was actually quoting in the thesis itself dates that were like recent articles, like let's say March 15th of 1885, but he sent this in for his thesis on April 1st of 1885. So he only had 2 weeks from that date to work on this. I had a deep respect for his intelligence, and I wanted to know why he was so fascinated by syphilis, and actually not even just syphilis, but the last effects of it, which are called tabes dorsalis, where the syphilis invades your spinal columns and your brain, and that's the part I got fascinated with. And it kind of like exploded from there. And then I said, well, who does he know who had syphilis?
Right.
And I couldn't find anybody in his writings that kind of fit this bill until I ordered a book by accident called the Last Conan Doyle Mystery, and it was actually about his father, Charles Doyle, and it was his artwork. Charles Doyle, Conan Doyle's father, the artwork he was creating in a mental asylum for supposedly dipsomania, alcoholism. But he lived there for the rest of his life. He was imprisoned for 15 years until the day he died. So I actually reached out to the mental hospitals and I asked them, could you send me Charles Doyle's medical records? And they said, yeah, of course we can. So I got these files of Charles Doyle's medical charts and I went through them and I kept on seeing little pieces that matched the imaginary patient, when I thought was imaginary in Conan Doyle's thesis. And it was Charles Doyle was having delusions of grandeur. He was communicating with birds. He was without a reflex on his knees, which Conan Doyle actually writes about this reflex being absent in all patients with neurosyphilis. So all of a sudden I got this connection going. Charles Doyle is probably really in the mental hospital, not for alcoholism, but for syphilis. And then, of course, I made all these other connections between Charles Doyle and his son, Conan Doyle. And of course, there was this book that Conan Doyle wrote called The Third Generation, which is basically a grandfather giving his son syphilis, giving his grandson syphilis, was transferred through all 3 generations. And at the end, this guy was about to get married, and he knows that his life is going to be one of just ruin, and he just throws himself in front of a horse and dies. So that's kind of where I kind of entered the Jack the Ripper realm, because when I found out that he thought he had syphilis himself, and then of course all the other biographies of Conan Doyle say that we don't really know what really happened with Conan Doyle between the years 1887 and 1888. He was lost. And I had to track him down. And I'm like, oh, look at him. He's at these meetings in London at a dental meeting in August. Why would he be at a dental convention? He's a doctor. Why is he over playing cricket? Why is he kept on being in London at too many times during the Ripper crimes? And I was like, I remember at this point, I did not know about Jack the Ripper. I only knew about where he was. I was just trying to trace where the guy was. And then I said, what was going on in London in August and September of 1888? There's got to be something happening here, because he keeps on winding up at this here. And that's where I saw that the crime sprees of Jack the Ripper were occurring during those exact times. So like this moment 133 years ago, this early fall into summer into fall is exactly when he was committing his murders.
Wow. So you think it could have been Arthur Conan Doyle as Jack the Ripper?
Yeah, unfortunately, I do. And my whole entire thing was, remember, I was looking at it as this genius doctor that I was trying to emulate. and then finding things that made it so that I was like, no, he can't be Jack the Ripper. It's impossible. And I did everything that I could to say that my hero could not be this serial killer. Unfortunately, every time I tried to exonerate him, I found another piece that connected him to the murders. Like, for instance, one of the things I found out about him during his college days, which were really just his medical student days, was he worked in a vivisection laboratory with Professor Rutherford, who's the model for Professor Challenger in the Lost World. And he was doing experiments on dogs where he was cutting their throats, cannulating their livers, and opening up their abdomens, which is kind of like murder number 4 for Jack the Ripper of Cathaneto. And it kind of just matched. Everything that he was doing kind of matched the crimes. And so when I tried to say he couldn't have done these things, I kept on finding more evidence that kind of linked them. And one of which was, at the end, I kind of had a feeling that Jack the Ripper had to have been a Freemason. Now, don't get me wrong, Freemasons are a community, a brotherhood, a community. They do amazing things for forever. They've done amazing things for communities. As a matter of fact, Doyle's Lodge was actually raising money for the 50th anniversary of the hospital in Portsmouth where he lived. I mean, they do amazing things for the community. It just happens to be that he learned some of the rituals that they did, and he actually became obsessed with them, and he carried them out. And that's the part of my research that I think is so revelatory. It's kind of, it shows you why the murders were conducted in such a fashion.
Plus, the fact that he wrote Sherlock Holmes, so you know that he knows what he's talking about as far as a crime scene and how he could do it and get away with it.
Correct. Yeah, he can orchestrate. He is a master. He can outthink. He can always be one step ahead in his mind. He knows exactly what's going to be the outcome and how to elude that outcome. That's why I just love the Sherlock Holmes stories. He really kind of he puts all those pieces into his stories.
So with what you've uncovered, what do you believe the inner workings of his mind is? It's so interesting to find that he's a medical student, so clearly he wanted to help people at some point in time, but then he wants to do these heinous acts as well.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, his medical career, he gave up pretty quick. He was not very good with the patients, shall we say. He basically just said he had 2 rooms, a consulting room and another room, and patients didn't enter them. Not the best of physicians, as we would consider him in my field. So yes, I think he was really, he chose medicine. I think it was more for the money, and he also had a person that he knew that was a doctor, and he wanted to be like this other physician that he knew, this man Brian Waller, who lived in his house, and he's actually one of the other reasons why Doyle kind of channeled himself into this very pent up, angry young adult, because this lodger of his that lived in the Doyle household, first he lived there to, he was in medical school. He's a couple years older than Doyle himself. And he basically fell in love with Doyle's mom. Ooh. And over time, he basically became the head of the household. As his father went into the mental hospital, he started taking over the household, paying the rent. The Doyle family couldn't afford the rent. They moved in with Brian Waller, and eventually Mary Doyle, Conan Doyle's mother, moved into his estate in Yorkshire for about 20 years. And of course, Doyle would have felt very upset that this was what his mother had to, come to. And they actually think that maybe one of her children was actually fathered by Brian Waller. The kid's name is actually Brian, and it's a girl, spelled Bryan.
Interesting.
That is interesting. So do you think he had he targeted, prostitutes? Do you think he had an anger towards these women because they were beneath him, or he felt like they were beneath him?
No, actually what I think is this. First of all, yes, the word I like the word you use, Ryan. He targeted them, and not only did he target London prostitutes, he like actually selected women that would have been of the right age to have been attractive to his father, the man that he thought would have given him syphilis. So in other words, these weren't like 18, 16-year-old women of London that the Ripper was going out at night to kill. They were 42 years old, 45 years old, 47-year-old. They weren't young and beautiful, let's say. They were older women that would have maybe 20 years ago, when Charles Doyle would have gotten his syphilis, been very attractive. And that's the age range that I think Doyle or the Ripper selected on purpose. He targeted them.
Wow. What was the mood like back when this happened in England, as far as like, were people really concerned about it, or was it like just kind of something like that's been kind of through the years has gotten bigger and bigger?
No, the Ripper crimes actually became a global sensation. Basically, the name Jack the Ripper just didn't stay in London. It kind of like radiated out all throughout England, Scotland, went across the English Channel to Europe. The name Jack the Ripper went over to Japan, went over to America. Any type of crime that kind of fit this Ripper, mutilations were being labeled, the American Ripper. I think CJ knows all about the American Ripper.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep, there's a case that was very similar, and I started to wonder a little bit whether we were looking at someone who was just duplicating those kind of things, or if it was the same person.
Right.
Because of the way the murders were taking place. But there was, these people were more, whoever this person was that was committing these other murders, it was similar in a way, but not enough to say that it would have been our so-called Jack, because this guy killed people with an axe, which made me link it to the axe murders that took place in Villisca and places like that, because they said it was someone who had probably been riding the trains. And
Right.
so I thought, that I was looking at that too and going, was he involved in this? But then it was like, no, this guy took an axe to people and he didn't care. He didn't do things as meticulous and detailed and surgical.
Right.
This guy just took an axe to people and that was it.
Yeah, less, just more violent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and CJ, I love the word you use there, surgical. I mean, that's
Yes.
exactly the word that I would use. And that's one of the reasons
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't exonerate Doyle, because he has the surgical training.
Right.
And
maybe also talking about the fact that he was trained under very low light or even dark room with the people that he studied with, the people that trained him, how he was trained in darker areas. So for him to be able to go out in the middle of the night and be able to do this to women in the dark really wasn't that far off.
CJ, I'm going to even add to what you just said. You're on it 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was actually doing my research, again, I was trying to exonerate Doyle. I wanted to say he couldn't have done it. The Mitre Square being in the darkest corner, no light. The guy couldn't see, except for one thing. Doyle, in the early 1880s, we're talking like 8 years before the Ripper crimes, had a column in the British Journal of Photography. Doyle was a master photographer at the age of 20. He actually had dark rooms that when he was a ship's physician to going to Africa, he actually converted one of the cabins into a dark room. And he actually says, I didn't have the right light source, so I was able to basically make a makeshift light by taking a red muslin cloth and wrapping it around my lantern, which if you look at the Ripper, the people that identified the Ripper being out and about, they said Jack the Ripper wore a red scarf around his neck. And I'm assuming that red scarf was what he would wrap around his light to make it give him enough light to commit those surgical operations out in
Right.
the open with almost no light. They say, William Gull, the Queen's physician, but he was 71 years old with a stroke, and
Yeah,
lighting
no.
is impossible. He wouldn't be able to see
Mhm.
in the darkness.
Now, do
No.
you think that if the name Jack the Ripper didn't exist, if it was just a random person killing these people without the name, it would have spread as far as it did? Do you think it was the name Jack the Ripper that helped spread the case around as much as it did? If it
I
was
think
just
certainly it helped, but you have to remember, before he was Jack the Ripper, the press was calling him Leather Apron. And so they had other names already. They were trying to the papers want to sensationalize a crime because it sells papers. So if you give it a name like the High Rip Gang, which is what they first had it in, like the High Rip Gang was committed murder number 1. And then all of a sudden they say it was Leather Apron, and they keep on bringing up Leather Apron. It becomes like this scary name. But then of course, supposedly, we don't really know if it was really Jack the Ripper. I think it actually was, and I can explain why I think it was. But there was a letter to the press that says, "Don't mind me giving myself the name Jack the Ripper." So we actually, the killer came up with the name Jack the Ripper himself. Now, and I think it's actually, and some people were thinking it may be a news reporter who came up with it, and that can be true. But there's one thing in that letter I did that kind of like stands out to me, and it's the word "catch me if you can." See if you can catch me now. All the letters of Jack always have this little, like almost like nursery rhyme, "catch me if you can" phrase that's in them. So the one that Jack the Ripper sent to the pathologist has the word, "They think they can catch me now," and that's how it ends it. It's always this little, it's like a little catchphrase to, call it what it is. It's a little catchphrase he adds to his notes, giving you the authenticity. And that letter we know was written by Jack the Ripper, because in that letter to the pathologist, he actually sends half a kidney of the victim to the pathologist. And it matched. When, they took the autopsy, they took it together, they matched everything up.
Speaking of letters, Daniel, can you also address the Dear Boss letter and whether you believe that was actually him or not? Do we know for sure that was him, or was that a copycat?
I will say this. I'm not exactly sure if Jack the Ripper officially penned it or not, but I do think there's something really important about that letter. Dear boss, they say that, that whole thing, the right track, and there's a lot of English words in there. But Doyle actually wrote an article to the press that he personally read that letter and analyzed it. And the important thing about that is that the Black Museum at Scotland Yard actually invited him over, looked through all of the materials of Jack the Ripper, and he did. But I think it was so important for him to actually write that he put his hands on that letter, because just at that same time, Francis Galton invented the system of fingerprinting, which really wasn't, it wasn't really known to people yet. Doyle did know about it. He just didn't realize, wait a minute, if my fingerprint is ever associated with anything of Jack the Ripper, well, by extension, I'm Jack the Ripper. But by writing about the Dear Boss letter in such detail, saying, I went to the Black Museum, he writes, I handled all of the evidence of the Ripper case. I went through all of the files, and I'm analyzing this one letter. And it's written, and I spoke to another expert on Jack the Ripper who said he saw a facsimile. And I said, he did not. He actually writes about the quality of the paper and the red ink that Jack used. You can't make a facsimile with the same paper and the red ink. He saw the real thing. So I don't agree with the world expert on that. And I told him this. Said, you don't take a machine back in the 1890s and you put beautiful red ink on it. And he writes about the quality of the ink and the quality of the paper, which is another thing that's important about the paper too, which is from a special company called Peary & Son of Aberdeen, Scotland. And I'll go into that too. But he made sure his fingerprints were on that letter, because if anybody ever questioned him, hey, we found your fingerprint on this evidence, he could say, of course you did.
I touched it.
I held it. Yeah.
You invited me to the Black Museum to put my hands all over the place. Don't you remember? He had an airtight alibi. The guy's a genius. You were saying that before, Ryan. He knows how to orchestrate every move. He always thinks ahead.
2 steps ahead.
And he did. And I like the fact that he actually mentions the paper. And there's actually one thing that my publisher, when I was doing this for the first time, my publisher said, "Did you ever read Patricia Cromwell's book and know that if the connection between the Perry paper?" So he said to me, "Listen, it's over. You don't have any connection between Perry paper." I said, "You didn't even give me a chance." And I said, give me like a week. And literally within, I think it was like 2 hours, I said, I have a direct connection between this specialized paper used by the Ripper and Arthur Conan Doyle. He says, "I want to know." I said, "Rudy, this is what it was. When his professor, William Rutherford, the vivisectionist, the one is Professor Challenger, he writes, and in page 9, it outlines of histology that Doyle took in his class. I demand that my students all use the high-grade antique notepaper made by Peary and Son of Aberdeen, Scotland." Well, I was like, well, I mean, there you go. I mean, yes, Arthur Conan Doyle is from an artistic family. His father is an artist. His uncle is Richard Doyle, the famous caricaturist for Punch magazine. His grandfather is John Doyle. But I didn't want loose, empty theories here. I wanted to have tangible evidence. This man was William Rutherford's lab student, his lab assistant. And if Rutherford says you must use Peary paper, the antique type, which is what the letters are written on, and Doyle's that student, that's the connection. He goes, "Oh, good. We can go on with your book then." That's exactly what he said to me.
Well, you proved it. There you go.
Yeah.
I think my favorite part of that letter, though, lines up with Doyle becoming a doctor.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
They call me doctor now.
Yes, they do. Exactly. And just so you know, when Doyle got his medical degree, going back to the doctor letter, when Doyle got his medical degree, the picture that he drew of himself was a picture of a doctor with a diploma that said "License to Kill." Now, I don't know if I would have illustrated something like that, but
probably the best idea.
Yeah, that's one of the most famous.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was not a good thing to draw. License to Kill is not what you want to be licensed as a doctor to do, but that's what he actually writes.
So I'm trying to put the timeline. Did he become a doctor after the?
No, he was a doctor before. He got his medical degree like in 1882, let's say, and then he got his official MD in 85, and the Ripper crimes were 3 years later.
Oh, okay.
So then, was it after the Ripper crimes that he started writing books and writing the show?
No. He started doing his first Sherlock Holmes novel right before the crimes came out, and I like the second novel the most, The Sign of the Four, because in The Sign of the Four, he plants so much of, laying it beneath the lines is Doyle's specialty. And one of the things that I think I'm the first to ever decipher is that he uses certain addresses in certain times that are exactly the Ripper. Like, in other words, he uses, in one of the chapters, he tells Dr. Watson, "Dr. Watson, I need you to go get me Toby the Sleuth Hound from 3 Pinchin Lane at 1 a.m. precisely." So first of all, you're waking up a guy at 1 a.m. and you got to go to 3 Pinchin Lane. To you and me, that has nothing to do with Jack the Ripper, except that murder number 3, which was conducted at Dutfield Yards in Whitechapel, Mr. Dutfield moved his yard to 5 Pinchin Lane. So the address and by the way, the story takes place September of 1888. So even though it's written in 1891, Doyle sets it in 1888, September, end of September, and he puts Watson at 1 a.m. at Dutfield Yards. That is the exact time that the murder took place. It was exactly 1 a.m. The clock just rang, 1 a.m., and it was at Dutfield Yards. It's the exact locations. He's putting them in there, but he doesn't tell you you're in Dutfield Yards.
It almost sounds like he's becoming Moriarty in real life.
Yes, exactly. And unfortunately, he basically did. And Watson is his alter ego.
It's
like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
Right, exactly. Which,
And these-
by the way, that's exactly what the Sign of the Four is. It is a tribute to Robert Louis Stevenson's duality of nature. So that's why he uses cocaine. It brings
leading
out
a double
black
life.
reaction. Yeah. It brings out a black reaction in Sherlock Holmes when he uses the cocaine. That's what Watson actually says. And all the locations in that story are from, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
So essentially, his books are more like his diary.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it really is.
He became so engrossed in his works that he started becoming the people that he wrote about, as far as, evil and yeah.
Well, he knew all about it. He knew exactly what it should be. That's why his stories are just so lifelike, because he had that experience to make them lifelike.
And he probably thought about it a lot, and he was like thinking, well, I can probably do this and get away with it because I know exactly what the cops are going to do before they do it.
Well, I mean, he does say in The Speckled Band, when a doctor does go wrong, he is the worst of criminals. He has nerve and he has knowledge. Well, Doyle was a doctor, and he did have the nerve and he did have knowledge. And that was another thing when I was doing all this original research on Conan Doyle, to know who he was. I wanted to know who he was as a kid. What made him tick? I mean, I just saw the movie Reagan today, and it was the same thing. Like, what made Ronald Reagan the president? What he was. It was his childhood upbringing that made the man. Well, and for Doyle's case, he was beaten by the prefects of his school. He learned boxing as a way of surviving. He told his stories to survive and get food because he was the poorest kid there. He had basically no clothes, no food, no money. His first day at a prep school, he stabs a kid just to prove that he's the strong kid on the block. His first day in medical practice, he beats up his boss. His first day moving into his own medical practice, he gets into a brawl on the street and he beats people up. He pushes down a group of soldiers outside of a theater to impress a girl. I mean, these are not normal things that one does.
So would you say that you would deem him to possibly be somewhat of a sociopath?
I would have to say he's a sociopath. Yeah.
Okay.
That's exactly the word I would use for it. And I think actually more than that, I think he had what's called an ID fix. It's like a fixed idea. I think he had, and he actually writes about this in the Six Napoleons, that once you get the idea out of your head, you can move on with your life. And I think he was basically fixed on this idea that he had to revenge his father, get revenge for his father. His father was wronged by prostitutes. Not that he went out there and solicited himself, but he wound up with syphilis. According to Doyle, he passed it on to him, which is why Conan Doyle says, I was getting electroconvulsive therapy when I was only 12, which is true. This he was. He had neuralgia. He was experimenting on himself with pyrogallic acid and gelsemium, which is a poison, actually. And he writes all about this, how he almost died. And he has this rash of looks like psoriasis, and he's trying to treat himself with photographic chemicals. But as I said, I was going through his record, and I am a physician. And every physician, knows that the rash of psoriasis mimics the rash of syphilis. They look identical. That's why syphilis is called the great, imitator. It looks just like psoriasis, which he had. So all of his neuralgia and his symptoms that he always writes about that plagued him since early childhood. I have a feeling at one point when he figured out that his father was in a mental hospital not for alcoholism, because he would have dried out years before, but he was going to be there for the next 12 years, was because he had syphilis and he was never going to get better, and that those symptoms are now being passed to him. And of course, the one thing that was really, for me, really was like the proof of all this, was that in his thesis, literally on the last page of his thesis, he writes, there are two medicines one can use. One is like Murrell's solution, and one is like nitroglycerin. He didn't like the nitroglycerin. He writes, I didn't like nitroglycerin. It had too many side effects. So I like Murrell's solution. And I myself have taken 10 times the amount without any ill effect. And that's basically a quote out of his thing. And I'm saying, wait a minute. Why would a guy be taking 10 times the amount of Murrell's solution at age 25 if the only thing it treats is syphilis? So if you think that this thing is treating syphilis and you're taking it at 10 times the amount, that means you must think you have syphilis. I mean, that's the way I was looking at this data.
Yeah. Why else? Why else would you do? Would you do that to yourself?
Right. And he says, and I'm taking 10 times the amount. And he's making sure he knows. And you already know he took the other one too, and it gave him side effects, which means he was taking a lot of nitroglycerin already. And he said, I can't take that one anymore. Let me try something else.
So from a child that gets syphilis from their parent, like what point or what age range, or is it is there a typical age range where like the kind of delusions and mental capacity things would have started affecting him?
Well, you can get the third phase of syphilis gives you a lot of the delusions, the delirium, the cognitive, the mental effects. But then again, when you go through all the things, now, yeah, I had to kind of break things apart here because the Doyle family did believe in fairies and sprites. They were really big on that, and that was big in the 1800s.
Yeah.
So you can't look at that as being wrong. That was the time, and they all believed in that. But Charles Doyle went to this other extent, which even his son said was not normal, which was the ability to talk to birds, and that was magical thinking, which is part of syphilis, actually. So he had magical thinking. He actually had all these delusions that the birds were growing and getting bigger and taking over. So we know that he was having some type of, and he was also getting epilepsy, and he was also getting these other things with his reflexes. Like something was going on when Charles Doyle was turning 40 to 50. So
Did that
have
anything to do with his interest in spiritualism? The fact that he was seeing things because of the syphilis.
That's a great question, but I don't think so. So spiritualism was a little bit different. I think they believe more in the Doyle family themselves, like Richard Doyle and Charles Doyle believed in fairies and sprites. That world. Conan Doyle was like basically the spiritualist leader. So basically the Fox sisters basically created this new, very embraced new religion, basically, of spiritualism. And Doyle was drawn to it like a magnet. And not only that, he was their champion. So the spiritualism part's different. His wife Jean was a very powerful medium, and she was well respected. Doyle actually wrote about David Douglas Home, which is also a very famous. I think he's really from Connecticut, but he's really also associated with England. He's a very well-known medium, and Doyle actually wrote all about him. And Doyle, although he says the first time I got involved with spiritualism was when I was in 1885 with a Colonel Drayson. It's actually, if you look at his diary, and I found this, he actually went to a meeting by Joseph Cook, who was actually talking about basically the metaphysical and the potential of talking to the dead. So I think Doyle was getting involved in this much earlier, but that was not really kind of like the sprites and fairies. That was more of spiritualism. So really Conan Doyle was, and his mother would have nothing to do with it. So it wasn't like a Doyle thing. That his mom said, "Do not talk about, spiritualism with me. I don't want to know your religion." Now,
yeah, he also, they did a TV show about it a while back, about how Conan Doyle basically went to some of these events with what was his name? The escape artist,
Harry Houdini.
Houdini,
Harry Houdini.
because Houdini did not believe in any of this stuff. In fact, he loved debunking it. He was a huge skeptic.
Yeah, but
never believed any of the paranormal.
Yeah, but CJ, very interesting. So Doyle and Houdini were corresponding with one another, and Doyle, being the master writer he is, basically was telling Houdini, "You are the greatest medium on this planet." And when Houdini came over to the Hippodrome in England, he stayed with Conan Doyle, and basically Conan Doyle almost kind of was like, let me kind of like really tell you all about it. And he was open-minded. So Harry Houdini at this point, his mom's still alive, and he's open-minded, and he was listening to Conan Doyle talk about the religion, spiritualism.
Mm-hmm.
So, but he listened to him very carefully, and he started doing his own research on it, and he realized that that when a medium is being channeled the information and she writes on paper, like spirit drawing,
Mhm.
I could be not an artist at all, but if it's channeled to me, I can draw like Picasso, or I could
Right.
draw
Yeah.
like Rembrandt. And if you get a message from beyond and it's coming from a Russian, you're going to actually write in Russian, even if you don't speak Russian. And Houdini knew this. And what happened was in Atlantic City, on Harry Houdini's mother's birthday, Gene and Conan Doyle brought Houdini into their apartment, the hotel room, and basically did a seance. And Gene Leckie wrote down like 15 pages, but it was all in the King's English. And Houdini was like, "Wait a minute, you gave me all this information on spiritualism. You told me if your wife was channeling my mom, she should be writing in German. She didn't know English." And that got Houdini very upset, and that's when he really went out of his way to try to debunk spiritualism.
Right.
He went to Boston.
I remember that.
He tried to like bash her in Scientific American. He tried to, so they got into a major scuffle. At first,
Right.
it was not too terrible, but then after with Marjorie the Medium, Doyle went. He went after him. So that's it. This guy's in trouble with me. As a matter of fact, and I'm not saying I have zero information on this, so we'll give you a little thing. But supposedly, I've heard that one of Doyle's followers may have like hit Houdini in the abdomen and somewhere in like Montreal, Canada, and gave him like what looked like an appendicitis and killed him on Halloween. That's part of the legend I hear. I don't know if Doyle had anything to do with it. I doubt it, but that's what I've heard over the years.
Yeah, what was that story again about how he went? I can't remember what the story was. Something about, you mentioned appendicitis or something.
Yeah,
did he like get punched or something?
Yeah, he actually asked the guy, "You could punch me in my stomach as hard as you can, and I'll be able to take the blow." But the guy was like a professional like puncher, like a boxer type of guy, and basically like supposedly ruptured his appendix, and the magician died a couple of hours later. But so, Doyle himself, that was the other thing. I always looked at the Ripper crimes as, complete darkness, out in the open. Unlike H.H. Holmes, who did everything indoors in his castle and under, he had all the time he wanted to play, tricks on their brains, like false wall, supposedly. You open the door, you think you're getting out, it's all brick wall. No, the Ripper was able to do these things outdoors. If he got caught, he would be able to have to fight himself off. I mean, especially on that fourth murder in Mitre Square, he actually was locked in a corner. There was no escape. So, and the police went around every 15 minutes. And what I said is to myself was, Doyle better know how to defend himself when I was doing the research. And of course, I found out that Doyle learned how to box at the age of, he was actually in a street gang at the age of 5, the Sent Hill Boys. He was their champion at the age of 6. Who's beating older kids up, and he also got into fights and lost too. And then he went to his Stonyhurst College, which is basically like elementary school and junior high. Got professional boxing lessons there. And when we became the ship's physician on the Hope in the Arctic, the first day on the boat, he challenges the first mate, the biggest guy on the boat, and they make a makeshift boxing ring on the deck. And Doyle beats the guy up, and they said the quote is, "Colin, this is the best surgeon we've ever had. It's even black in my eye." So the guy was tough, and that's one thing that I've always seen with Aaron Kaminsky. They say that he could have been the Ripper, but he was like 100-pound anorexic. I mean, the women of Whitechapel. I just want people to know these were not like the high-end, high society London ladies. These were street fighting women who had to go out into the streets at night, make a couple of shillings to pay for the Dawes house, and if someone tried to attack them, they would fight them off. As a matter of fact, one of the girls was in jail the day of her death. The last one, Catherine Eddowes, was in jail the day of her death, and the second murder, Annie Chapman, she was in a fight with another person over a bar of soap. She had marks all over her body from being in these fights. Like these were tough women. They didn't scream. No, there were no screams heard. I mean, one of the Annie Chapman's murder was committed outside of a couple of feet outside of the door of a house that had 17 people in it. with windows open. Remember, it's the summer. Her death was in August. That's summertime. It's hot. Windows were open, and it was 5 a.m., so people were getting up, when their body was found. So it was between 3 and 5 in the morning. So whoever was able to do the murder held her by the neck, and for a couple of, that takes a long time to suffocate someone without, because remember, there was no blood, exploding everywhere from like the neck wound.
Mm-hmm.
So this was a person that was able to really hold someone down without any scream being audible. He must have known he was powerful enough to do this. Kaminsky, no way. That guy's 100 pounds? I'm a weakling. I could have probably taken him on. So these women would have definitely made a noise, woken up someone. And all 4 murders had the same MO. There was no scream ever heard of any of them.
Well, is it possible that being a doctor, he would have known how to paralyze their vocal cords so that they couldn't scream when he was attacking them?
Yeah, but they would have found marks of like the chlorohydrate and like that.
Oh,
that
right.
kind of stuff. So they didn't find any of that. So they just know this guy was able to like kind of hold his victim, and the tongue was always with the tongue findings, how they looked. They knew that they didn't inhale like a medicine like that.
Right.
So
Interesting.
So why do you think he stopped?
Oh, again, I think okay. This is going to take me into that a little different approach here, but I think he needed to commit 3 murders. He had to commit 3. He had to commit it's a little bit weird, but back in the day when you were applying for the Freemasons, it's a very prestigious thing. This was not for like the average person. This was police chief, actually Chief Warner of the London Police. He was the head Freemason, like librarian, historian. I mean, you had chief of police, businessmen, doctors, lawyers. This was the intellectual elite of England. Yep. These are the members of the Freemasons. It was not just for anybody.
Right, exactly.
And what you did is to get the 3rd degree ranking back in the day. I'm not a Mason, and I hope I'm not saying anything wrong, but you had to go through an act of one of the Grand Masters, the Hiram Abiff, and it was about reenacting the penal signs, which is a neck wound, then a breast wound, and then the facial incisions. And
back then, yes, because those were the symbols that way back when Freemasonry was first around, you were threatened with death if you told the secrets. They don't follow up with that anymore. You're just simply demitted out of the group and you're not allowed to come back. But back then, there were threats of death. I mean, you were literally told that they would execute you if you spoke the secrets outside of the world of Masonry. So, and those things were illustrated in our ritual books back then.
Right. And going back to that, so remember, on this one, so murder number 1, and this is why I think that there were 3 murders, but the 3rd murder out of the 4, he got caught in the act, almost got caught in the act, and he fled the scene. He didn't complete it to what he needed to complete. But on murder number 1, although the victim had her abdominal mutilations and all this other stuff done to her, at the scene of the crime, the only thing that you saw was a neck wound. The Ripper buttoned up her dress, buttoned up her stays. You didn't see any of that until the morgue. Until the Inspector Spratling opened her up and said, "Oh my God, she's been mutilated." No one saw that at the scene. All they saw was the neck wound, which is what they call penal sign, the first penal sign, And then at murder number 2, which is Annie Chapman, the Ripper dipped the backside of her hand in blood, and then made sure she was naked to the wind. Basically, she was this one was completely naked, and her left hand was put on her left breast. So it becomes this second sign. The 3rd murder, he didn't complete, but the 4th one, he actually was the only one he did actually facial mutilations on, and that was basically the last of the penal signs, which is like a wound against the forehead, and he basically reenacted it so that whoever was looking, and Warren was the chief of police, and he would have known these rituals. He should have known that that's what was going on here.
And the writing on the wall on the side of the building there too, the code that came directly out of a Masonic ritual book.
Right.
The books of the degrees.
And it's funny, CJ, and remember it was Warren who said, "I want this erased. I don't want this photographed." And again, he made it out to be like it would bring anti-Semitism, but yet there were they spoke about this in the courthouses about this. It wasn't for that at all. And we know it was the Ripper who wrote it because he actually left a piece of the victim's dress at the site. So they matched the dress to the writing on the wall. So they knew that the Ripper actually wrote that message. It wasn't someone else who wrote that.
Yeah, and it's a set of lines from one of the Masonic degrees. It's something specific that you would only learn if you were in that Masonic degree, if you were there for that specific degree, that you would learn those words.
Right. And that's why, as I said, I didn't know Doyle was a Freemason up until basically almost at the end of my research, because it's hard to find that. But in 1887, he joined the Freemasons, and then by March, he was a third-degree Mason. And then, amazingly, in February of 1889, after the Ripper crimes ended, he demits.
Right.
Which is very odd. That's almost something I would almost think it would be unheard of. That organization to be in it in the first place. And he was nominated by the mayor of Portsmouth. I mean, he had some heavy backers behind him. You wouldn't give that up. It was something that he finished. He completed. He got everything out of his system, and he could go on with his life. And that's what I think happened with these Ripper crimes.
Yeah, and it's also weird that he didn't choose to take any of the ranks beyond that, to go through any of the other lodges. He simply went through the first three, became a Master Mason, and left it at that. Yep. But to demit out, I have to wonder if something actually, because that was after he committed the murders, correct?
Yes, exactly, in February, correct.
I wonder, do you think it's possible that even deeming that he may have been a sociopath, most sociopaths, I don't know if I want to say that they really don't, I mean, that mostly it seems like they don't really feel a sense of guilt for what they've done.
Right.
But do you think it's possible that something in him maybe cracked a little bit and he realized, oh my God, what have I done? And realized that maybe he wasn't at the ethical standards of what a Freemason should be to continue on within his lodge. That maybe he had embarrassed himself in front of his brothers.
Yeah, exactly. Because remember, I think after he finished the fourth murder, I think he could go on with his life. I think he could live a regular life again. He did what he needed to. That ID fix was done, and now he knew, I'm not gonna be with my brothers. This is not for me. I did the wrong thing, and I used their own ritual, and for my advantage. It's
right.
The wrong thing to do.
So that's why I'm wondering if maybe something in him cracked a little bit and he realized that ethically, morally, he had done something that was just not a good thing that he should have done, that he never should have, wrote those words on the wall. He never should have murdered those women. He never should have used the code or something like that.
Yeah. And he apologizes to the Masons in the Valley of Fear. He actually says, the Masons aren't they only for good in the community? He actually uses those words, like he was one at one point.
Right.
Actually, he may have actually joined back again. I think in 1911. I think there was something with him going back into the Masons. I'm not exactly sure that real connection there. I can't find proof. I hear it out there that he went back.
That would make sense though, because if he wasn't presented as any kind of criminal or having committed any crime that they actually knew that he committed, or any ethical, moral things that he shouldn't be doing, they would have allowed him back in good standing again.
Sure.
If you demit out and then you say, I really do want to come back in, then, as long as you haven't committed any crimes or anything ethically, morally bankrupt that you shouldn't be doing.
Right.
The one time reminds me of, I don't remember what state this was from, but there was a murderer out there who he actually was a Mason, and I guess he must have let it slip that he committed these crimes, and he sent in a DNA test, got himself DNA tested to find out about his ancestry. Here, his DNA matched up with the murderer, and I can't remember which crime it was because it was out in the public. It was one of those killers that was out there that they're like, well, he busted himself. Like, you didn't think you left DNA behind at the crime scene, so you sent in your DNA for an ancestry test. Oops.
Yep.
And he was immediately kicked out. I mean, you do something morally, ethically bankrupt
Yes.
to embarrass yourself in front of your brothers and sisters, and you are out the door.
Yeah, I
That
don't
is not something that they will take lightly.
Yeah, it's not accepted. And I don't think Doyle
Mhm.
would have ever admitted to his crimes. But I
Well,
think,
no, probably not. But
but I think
ethically,
internally he knew to
morally,
get out.
consciously himself, he must have maybe to some extent thought, oh, I really screwed up.
Yep, exactly.
So-
I just like the fact that Doyle is a man of really good secrets. He does not share anything, not even with his wife or his kids. I mean, certain things, just Doyle himself taking away Jack the Ripper, but just cool things that he's done. Were the Sign of the Four, as I mentioned, was a tribute to Robert Louis Stevenson. The character names, like Long John Silver and Jonathan Small being first names and last names opposites. The locations, the post office is exactly where the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde starts. All the little pieces in there are the same. The one I'm having a new article come out on is going to be the Scarlet Letter is actually the basis of a study in Scarlet. They're the same story, just told in a different fashion. You go from England.
That's right. You were going to touch on that.
Yeah. You go from England to America, which is going west, while in this story you went from basically Connecticut to Salt Lake City, which is west, and all of the characters and the themes and why Sherlock Holmes plays the violin is because in the Scarlet Letter, Hawthorne writes, playing the violin as a treat for the gods. I mean, he just puts the word by word into his stories. And that's, he never left any of that evidence behind. He holds back. He doesn't share with anybody. He leaves it for people to find. And I think on this one, unfortunately, with Jack the Ripper, he left a lot of clues in those stories behind for you to find. And they're there. As a matter of fact, one thing I looked at, as I mentioned before, I looked at the Sign of the Four, and I was like, wow, it takes place September of 1888, and he's writing this in 1891. I'm like, that's kind of cool. And then I'm like, wait a minute. I looked at all the dates in the other ones. I'm like, 33% of all of the Sherlock Holmes tales take place on dates that the Ripper was out and about. I'm like, the numbers are astronomical. I mean, it shouldn't be that much. But 33 means 1/3 of all stories out of the 60 took place on the dates of the Ripper crimes, and when he brings Dr. Watson back and Sherlock Holmes back and the Hound of the Baskervilles, and that's written in like 1901. What day do you think he picks? He picks September 26, 1888. I mean, what was on his mind? There. Yeah, he picks actually the date where in just 2 days it's going to be the last Ripper crime.
So he was telling us that's what the plan was a little bit. I also feel like he almost attempted to out himself. Had we had better technology back then to analyze like the letters that he wrote, if you compare Arthur Conan Doyle's handwriting to the Jack the Ripper letters, my God.
Yep.
If they had had that technology back then to actually stop and look and compare the handwriting, I think in this current day and age, he would have gotten busted like immediately. Like, look at this handwriting. This matches Jack the Ripper. What are you doing?
I've seen that
and
too.
His signature, the signature line that he closes with, himself was used in a Jack the Ripper letter.
Yes, I see that too, and I'm like, how is no one picking this up?
Yeah, how does no one see this? Like, if you look up the Jack the Ripper letters and compare it to Arthur's handwriting and the closing statement that he makes, his closing line just before he signs his name, it's identical.
And I think what the problem is, and it's good in his case, is that he's such a well-known person, and people adore him and worship him. I mean, he really. I mean, I am a Baker Street irregular. I'm part of this society too. I mean. He's a massive, amazing writer. I mean, I love what he writes. I try to write. I can't write like him.
Yeah,
and he's gifted. He's a gifted individual. Even as a physician, his knowledge base was leaps and bounds above mine. I mean, this guy is. He would have been my hero, but God, he did this. He did this.
I mean, he was kind of a combination of.
I had to exonerate the guy. I was like, oh, please don't be able to do this.
But
And
my
back then
question,
they were really like authors were really popular back then, because like Charles Dickens would read in front of an audience of like they were like the rock stars of their age back
Yes.
then. So nobody would want to believe that this was even like possible that someone like that would be able to do something like that.
But the problem was when it kind of almost backfired on him a little bit too, because remember he was a public figure, and after a while, even the press was saying, "Is Arthur Conan Doyle mad?" There was a lot of this stuff going around, like they were questioning his mental faculties at times because of the things he was talking about and promoting. As I said, one of them was in the papers when he was in 1885, where he writes that everybody, the prostitutes of Portsmouth are ruining the land here. They're ruining the value of homes and the apartments. And everybody here can trace back any type of inherited mental illness to these prostitutes. He actually writes these things in this article. And another doctor writes back and says, everything you wrote is false. And Doyle actually a week later wrote a retraction letter saying, I apologize. I mean, I think it was falsely apologetic. He didn't really want to apologize. He really meant
he just did it because he was called out on it. So
when Dr. Banks wrote that, he was like, you lied. Everything in this letter was wrong, Doyle. You're a liar.
Yeah. And he was like, oh, well, I should probably, to save face, I better apologize. Well, man, I have so many questions I love to ask, but I'm starting to lose my voice a little bit here.
No problem, Ryan. I said you toughed it out.
Well, I was looking forward to the show tonight, and I need to have you guys back on to kind of further the discussion. How do people get in touch with you, or how do people figure out, find your books?
Is that to me or to CJ?
To you. I'm not an author.
Oh, well, for me, I usually just tell people Amazon, because I usually find the best deals. I mean, I like a local bookshop. My problem is that where I live, I don't have a local bookshop. I mean, I have Barnes and Nobles, but it's a drive. They usually don't carry, but Amazon carries. My publisher, Square One Publishing, they carry the book. I have The Strange Case of Dr. Doyle, and I would only get the paperback. That's really the one that I'm proud of. The hardcover that came out, it's good, but I think the paperback, I revised it. It's much better. And my new book, Doyle's World, is all about Arthur Conan Doyle himself and Sherlock Holmes. And it talks a lot about spiritualism. I have a chapter devoted to spiritualism and Harry Houdini, and basically the evolution of that character, Sherlock Holmes.
When does that book come out?
Oh, it just came out. It's literally hot off the presses.
Nice.
Wow.
Yep, it's already listed on Amazon. If you go to amazon.com/ebooks, that's the best place to get the actual book listings. Amazon is doing this stupid thing now where you can't download a book to Kindle directly off Amazon or off the Kindle app. You have to actually go to amazon.com/ebooks and then download the book. And then it sends it to your app for you.
Wow.
Go figure. We want a Kindle app, but we don't want you to be able to purchase books through it.
Yeah,
oh
no.
One extra step now, and I'm sure there's money behind it. And there must be a reason.
That happened 2 years ago, and we were all shaking our heads like, what? We can't purchase a book through a book app?
Man, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. And this really kind of blew my mind.
Yeah, me too.
This whole thing is because it all makes sense. And I'm like, holy crap. So, yeah, that was awesome.
There's a few more things that I did not ask you about, but I think we've talked about in the past with it that I think we should go into further depth with on another one.
We will do.
I really do.
Anytime I really enjoyed this. And actually, this is my first time actually seeing myself on a computer screen. I've never done this before.
Yeah.
It's strange the
fun,
first
isn't it?
times.
Yeah. It takes a little adjusting. I have to hold my phone at an angle so that I can get my face, because if I put it straight, that's what you see.
It takes you getting used to, for sure. And again, thank you guys for joining us on National Chainmail Day.
Yep.
Yes. We really appreciate it.
I wish as I said, if I would have known, I would have worn the suit of armor. I had it ready to go.
That would have been a first.
That would have been a first for me, too.
Guys, thank you so much, and we'll definitely have you back on the show here soon.
Thank you, guys.
All right, you guys have a good night.
You too.
Night.
Bye.
Well, that was fun.
That
I
was
really
so much
enjoyed
fun. I
that
like,
conversation.
yeah. I'm glad I didn't. I actually ordered his book, and I could have got it delivered early
There you
enough.
go, Dan.
That I could have started reading it yesterday. But I was like, you know what? I really don't want to. I want to come into this blindly.
Yes, what
Then
that's
read
what.
his book.
Yeah. So now when you come back, you can have all the questions because I don't
Yeah,
have time
yeah.
to read. I have a 6-year-old, so I have no
I don't
time.
get to read as much, but winter. Well, we're at fall now. Fall and winter, I get much more reading done.
Learning about like Sherlock Holmes and the fact that this
It is
just
just
everything just
amazing.
matches up. So hey, Sean.
Hey, Sean. Yeah, and there was even a part that they were talking about the Freemasons, especially at the end when she was like, they would have kind of like kicked them out,
Mhm.
if they did anything awarded. But then I'm sitting there at the same time going, was he never considered? Like, was he never considered a suspect? Which I guess he wasn't. But then I'm kind of like, well, if he was, and the police had Masons in there, and they saw tendencies that it might be one of them, that maybe somebody did some covering up. You never know.
I mean,
Just interesting.
I have so many questions I could have asked, but I know if I went down that road, we would be here till like 11
Me
o'clock.
too. Me too.
Probably later than that. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna find a good cutoff spot. So when we do our part 2, we can go
Yeah.
further into the whole thing, like why was this never considered, stuff like that. So we do have the Ghost Sisters coming on Tuesday. I almost said Sunday.
Yeah.
I looked up I was trying to find the message where I sent to have them come on, and I looked up Ghost Sisters, went to the messenger, and there was no message.
What?
So I sent them a message. I'm like, be crazy here, but I have you on the list on my schedule to come on my show. And they never responded, but they did like my post I put up about them coming on the show. So I'm assuming that they know we're coming. They're coming on. So I don't know what happened to it. Maybe Sarah set it up because I had her book some shows for us. Or did you set it up?
No, you haven't shown me how to do it, so it wasn't me.
Well. Oh, because I was looking for the instant messenger where it said, "Hey, come on my show," but I never did. So apparently, somebody messaged them.
No, I remember the date. I remember. Yeah, I remember. I remember the date of the 24th. I swear it was in Messenger.
Yeah. Well, Mary said they.
No, actually, you just messaged me and said that we have them booked for the 24th. So
I wonder what happened to the message then. What did I delete it by accident or something? I don't know. So I'm gonna send them the link. Hopefully they show up. If they don't, we'll just talk about. We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. We're gonna wing it.
We'll wing it. So, guys, thank you who are tuned in. Thank you, Michael Brooks, Kristen, Sean, Josh, and Lost Souls, and Lois Clark. It is kind of a slow night for us, but it's a Sunday, so I understand. And plus, it's chainmail day. People were hanging out, outside and enjoying the fall equinox. So I can't blame them for that. Thank you so much, Rhonda. We'll see you on Tuesday night with the Ghost Sisters. Same freaking awesome time.
Same freaking awesome channel.
Damn straight. Have a good one. Good night, guys.